My name is Julia Anderson. I'm 27 years old, and I work at a small interior design firm in Seattle. I love getting lost in my work. It's a world where every design, every color is my choice. There, people listen to me. But the moment I step outside the office doors, that freedom stays behind. At home, I'm something else entirely. A shadow, always expected to help. My older sister, Melissa, has always been the star of the family. Married, mother to triplet boys, and the same story repeated over and over. Melissa's needs became the family's priorities. And me? I was just convenient. Anytime there was a family event, an emergency, anything, I was expected to be there. Whether I came home exhausted from work or was piecing together scraps of my own life, it didn't matter. If Melissa needed something, I was supposed to drop everything. No one even asked if I could manage. No one said, "Are you okay with this?" Orders were given, and I just quietly obeyed. Last year's family vacation still feels like a fresh wound. Mom had promised, "This time you'll get to relax too. We'll all pitch in with the kids." And I believed her, like a little kid smiling at a promise. When we got to the Oregon coast, the resort really was beautiful. Cool breeze from the ocean, the warmth of the sun, kids laughing in the sand, it all looked like a postcard. But once the rooms were assigned, the real picture came into focus. Melissa and Josh got a big suite, an oceanfront balcony, two bedrooms, all the comforts you could imagine. And me, I was given a small room in the back, no ocean view, just a parking lot. And I wasn't alone. They put all three of Melissa's boys in my room, too. "Julia, could you keep an eye on the boys a little? Melissa and Josh could use some time to relax," Mom said, like I wasn't there to enjoy a vacation, too, just to fulfill a duty. I didn't argue, just nodded, dropped my bag in the corner, and started settling in with the kids. Every morning, I had to wake up early, bathe them, get them dressed, feed them breakfast. While everyone else lounged around with coffee, snapped photos by the beach, laughed together, I was somewhere in the chaos, stuck with sandy shoes, tangled hair, and melting ice cream. The ocean. I could see it only from a distance, like a dream I wasn't allowed to touch. The book I had packed specifically for this trip stayed closed in my suitcase. The sketchbook I had carried with such hope remained empty. Every night, after exhausting the kids, I would collapse onto the bed, drained. When the family gathered to play music, laugh, and make memories at night, I stayed back in the room, listening to the kids snore. I'd stare out the window at the darkness, just barely hearing the faint sound of the waves, like freedom calling to me from far away. But there was no road that led to it for me. When one of the boys woke up thirsty or frightened, it was me they came to. Sometimes, half asleep, I'd wonder, has anyone ever cared about me like this? Has anyone thought that maybe I'm tired too? That maybe I want to run barefoot along the shore, carefree, even if just for one night? But then I'd swallow those thoughts down, because if I said them out loud, I knew exactly what I'd hear. Family means sacrifice. You don't have kids yet, you have all the time in the world. No one ever realized that having time and giving time, they're not the same thing at all. At night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My eyes burned, but sleep never came. Under my pillow, my phone kept lighting up with unread notifications. Melissa's Instagram stories, proudly tagged, #perfect family vacation. But it wasn't perfect, at least not for me. Those vacations, which were supposed to heal my spirit, had turned into just another burden. And what hurt the most was that no one ever asked, "How are you doing, Julia?" No one ever stopped for me. No one saw the exhaustion in my eyes, the loneliness clinging to me, the way my smile felt more like a mask barely holding itself together. There were only responsibilities, only expectations. And me, once again, quietly carrying it all without a sound, without complaint, without hope for anything different. In the months that followed the family trip, nothing changed. Mom would call with her sweet but commanding voice saying, "Melissa might need a little help this week, Julia. It's no big deal for you, right?" And me, out of habit, would just say, "Sure, Mom," and hang up the call. But something inside me had started to shift. Every time I took on someone else's responsibility, a small voice inside would whisper, "Is this really necessary? Is this really right?" When the plans for this year's family vacation came around, it was the same old story. Without asking me, without checking if I was even willing, a message popped up in the group chat. "Everyone's meeting at Mount Hope Resort this July. The bookings are done. Julia, make sure to bring some games and books for the kids again." No. "Can you make it?" No. "Are you okay with this?" Just instructions, just assumptions, as if I were a piece of furniture, expected to be wherever they needed me. As I read the message on my phone screen, my fingers hesitated. But this time, there was no sting of disappointment. This time, there was only a hard, steady silence inside me. I set the phone down and looked at myself. Really looked. In the mirror, there were faint dark circles under my eyes, ones I had been covering up with makeup for months. There was that same smile I had worn for years, tired, brittle, broken. I took a deep breath and, for the first time, asked myself directly, if I stay silent again, will anything ever change? And I knew the answer. So this time, I made a different choice. I broke the silence. That very night, I opened my laptop. I went onto the Mount Hope Resort website and booked a small, quiet single room, just for myself. No ocean view, no fancy suite. But it would be mine, on my terms. I also booked a rental car for myself. No more riding along in someone else's car, following someone else's plans. This time, I would be the one driving, setting my own course. The next morning, I posted my plans in the family group chat. I'll be staying at a different hotel and driving myself. It was like I had set off an earthquake. The first call came from Mom. "What's this new drama, Julia?" Mom's voice carried that familiar irritation, the same one that always came out whenever I dared to disagree. "You should be staying with everyone. That's how it's supposed to be," I answered calmly. "Mom, I just want a little time to myself this year. I'm tired. I need a real break, too." There was a long pause. Then she sighed heavily and said, "Fine, do whatever you want." After that, Melissa's message popped up. Long, emotional, dripping with guilt. "We thought the kids would be so happy to see you, but I guess your freedom matters more to you now than family." I read her message but didn't respond. This time, my silence wasn't surrender. This time, my silence was my choice. A little while later, Dad sent a short message. "Just be careful. Traveling alone isn't always easy." There was concern in it, but no judgment. I thanked him, and that was the end of it. If I'm being honest, I was scared. A part of me, the part that had been crushed under years of expectations, still panicked, but another part of me, newer, stronger, whispered back, "No more." That week, I took time off from work. I packed my bags, this time not with toys or books for someone else's kids. Only the things I wanted: my sketchbook, a good novel, and that bright blue dress I had always loved but never worn because there was never the right time. On Sunday morning, I set off in my rental car. Even the roads felt different that day. The air lighter, the sun softer. I played my music loud. The songs Melissa used to call weird. The songs I had denied myself for far too long. It took 4 hours to reach Mount Hope. The hotel lobby was quiet. No rush, no chaos. When I walked into my room, I just stood there for a few minutes, alone, but not empty. There was no ocean view from my window, just a glimpse of distant hills, and a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. I set my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto the bed. Stretching out flat, I closed my eyes and took a long, deep breath. This time, I was here. For myself. Not for anyone else. No pressure, no demands, no apologies. Just me and my own space. The soft sunlight falling across the walls seemed to whisper back to me, "This time, you chose yourself." My first night at the Little Mount Hope Hotel passed peacefully. No kids crying in the middle of the night. No mom knocking on my door with instructions. No sister sending guilt-ridden texts to ruin my sleep. Just me, my quiet breathing, and a strange new calm that slowly began to settle inside. When I woke up the next morning, it wasn't an alarm or a responsibility that pulled me out of bed. It was the soft, natural sunlight brushing against my face. For a few moments, I just lay there. No rush, no fear, no expectations. I had decided this day would be mine, lived on my own terms. After breakfast, I set out for a hike along the hills. The trail was lined with little patches of colorful wildflowers, and every few steps, a fresh, cool breeze would kiss my face. After a while, I pulled out my sketchbook and sat under a small hill, sketching quietly. For the first time in months, I didn't see the ocean that day. I didn't have a big lunch or do anything extravagant. I simply met myself, quietly, fully. But somewhere, deep in the corners of my mind, a faint uneasiness lingered. The family group chat was still alive, and every so often, another jab, another guilt trip would pop up. Melissa sent a picture, the kids playing by the beach, with a caption underneath, "Wish you knew how to make memories, too." I looked at it, and I said nothing. Later, Mom sent a long message. "Julia, if you get used to being alone, it'll be even easier for you to leave us one day, won't it?" As if I was still a child, one who needed to be shamed for asking for freedom. That evening, I sat alone in the hotel's little cafe, nursing a cup of coffee, when a thought struck me. All these years, everything I had carried silently. Was it just me? Or were there others too, tied up in invisible chains just like mine? I pulled out my phone, opened Reddit, and started typing an anonymous post. The words poured out of me. Sometimes the deepest exhaustion doesn't come from the weight you carry, but from the expectation that you're not allowed to ever get tired. I wrote about the last family trip, not naming anyone, not blaming anyone, just telling my truth. How promises were made and broken, how every time I stayed silent, I crushed my own dreams a little more. How a person, when used in the name of love, only for convenience, slowly begins to lose themselves. I didn't reread it, I didn't overthink, I just hit post and put my phone on silent. For me, it wasn't about being heard, it was about letting go, hanging my heart on some anonymous wall with no expectation that anyone would understand. But sometimes stories find their own way. When I came back to my room that night and checked my phone, it was flooded with notifications, thousands of comments on Reddit, hundreds of upvotes. People had seen me, really seen me. As I read through the comments, my eyes welled up. I thought I was the only one. "You put my story into words. Your bravery is showing us a path we didn't know we needed." Every word felt like a balm on my heart. For the first time, I realized my voice hadn't been lost. It had just been waiting to find the right place to be heard. But like every story where light reaches, shadows follow too. The next morning, Melissa called. The moment I answered, I could hear the tremble in her voice, a mix of anger, shame, and hurt. "You made us a laughing stock in front of the whole world," she shouted. "Did you even think about what the kids will feel when they grow up and see this?" I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear, took a deep breath, and for the first time, without fear, I said, I never mentioned anyone's name. Melissa, if you think that story is about you, maybe it's time you asked yourself why, not me. There was complete silence on the other end. And then a soft, broken sob. The line went dead. I set the phone down on the table and looked out the window. A thin mist was settling over the hills. Soft, gentle. But now, the mist didn't feel frightening anymore. It just felt like a path. One I was finally walking in my own way. That same evening, a short text came from Josh, Melissa's husband. I read your post. I'm sorry. You didn't lie. That's all it said. I placed my phone down quietly. A faint warmth spread in my chest, like a tiny crack forming in ice that had been frozen solid for years. That night, for the first time, I slept without guilt. No regrets, no fear, just a heavy, honest silence. Finally, fully mine. The impact of my Reddit post turned out to be much bigger than I had ever expected. Every day, new comments poured in, new people shared their stories, as if someone had cracked open a dam of silent pain. But just as the wave of support grew, so did the unease back home. At home, the conversations were no longer quiet or casual. They were loud, anxious. On the phone, Mom's voice wasn't just complaining anymore. It carried a sharp edge of panic. "You've made us look bad," she said. "People are talking. Relatives are asking questions. What is all this about?" I didn't know how many people had actually connected me to that anonymous post. But Mom and Melissa knew. They knew the pain described there was a mirror of their own making. Still, I didn't argue. I knew by now, fighting wasn't necessary. Some truths don't need shouting. Their very presence is loud enough. For days afterward, there was a strange quietness at home. Melissa stopped throwing little jabs. Mom stopped giving casual orders. Even the phone conversations became brief, almost formal. "Hope you're doing okay. Let us know if you need anything." But underneath that politeness was a deep, restless discomfort, as if, for the first time, they were being forced to really look at themselves. Then one afternoon, something happened that shook me deeper than I expected. Mom sent a long email. "Maybe we made mistakes," she wrote. "Maybe we expected too much from you. Without asking, without understanding. I know saying sorry won't fix everything, but if you ever feel ready to talk, I'm here to listen." I read the email slowly, then closed my laptop without replying. Because real apologies, the true ones, don't demand immediate forgiveness. They need time. They need space. 2 days later, Josh sent another text. "Melissa and I are starting family counseling. If you ever want to join, you're welcome. No pressure." These were the same people who once mistook my silence for weakness. And now, for the first time, they were learning how to love without expecting something in return. That night, I sat in my small hotel room, a mug of coffee warming my hands while a gentle rain fell outside. I looked out the window. Each drop seemed to be washing away something heavy. I realized then, change doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes, change arrives quietly, in a truth written without apology, without begging, without bending. A few weeks later, when I returned home, something happened that shook me to my core. For the first time, someone asked me, "What would you like, Julia?" It was Mom, the same woman who had always decided where I would go, who I would see, what I would do. Hearing that question come from her felt nothing short of a miracle. I smiled softly and lowered my head. There was no rush to answer, because now the weight of my voice lived firmly inside me, and it was never going to be lost again. There was no magical transformation in our relationships, no instant fix. But what existed now was real, honest. And that truth, no matter how small, meant more to me than any false warmth ever could. I had never realized how easy it was to make a habit of silence. For so many years, I had just bowed my head, carried the weight, followed the path laid out for me, without question. When I first said no, even I could barely believe it was my own voice. But now that I had begun carving out space for myself, I finally understood. Love isn't supposed to make you kneel. After that family trip, when I returned home, I felt a strange kind of peace. Even though conversations grew shorter, even though the old easy warmth had faded, there was a small light inside me, a hope that maybe, just maybe, I could build a new life, one where my choices mattered too. The beginning wasn't easy. Mom sometimes slipped back into old patterns, guilt trips over small things, emotional manipulations hidden in sweet words. Melissa, too, sometimes threw passive aggressive jabs. I guess you don't need anyone anymore, Julia. And each time it happened, a small battle would stir inside me. Would I slide back into old habits, or would I stand firm? The answer became clearer with every step. One day, when Mom said over the phone, "There's a family dinner on Sunday. You have to come," I replied, as gently and calmly as I could. "If I feel like it, Mom, no pressure." There was a stunned silence on the other end. For the first time, I heard a pause, a quiet filled with not just anger, but maybe somewhere a little surprise too. That day, I learned something. Setting boundaries isn't disrespect, it's a form of self love. Slowly, little changes began to appear. Mom started to ask, "If you're free, maybe you could join us," or "only if you feel up to it." Even Melissa, though rough around the edges, began to show small signs of effort, as if she too was starting to understand that my no wasn't an insult. It was simply my right. One day, when I was at my apartment, there was a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, I found Josh standing there, holding a small envelope, a few bills tucked inside. "This is for the expenses we dumped on you all those years," he said. "We understand now that apologies aren't just words, they're actions too." I took the envelope, but more importantly, I took the sincerity I saw in his eyes. The money didn't matter. What mattered was that someone finally acknowledged. What I endured wasn't right, and my silence would never again be mistaken for agreement. After that day, the tone of my family relationships began to shift. There were no more commands. Now, people asked. And if I said no, it wasn't held against me. Or at least they tried not to. There was some distance now between us. Yes. But in that distance, there was a strange honesty. We weren't walking on top of each other anymore. We were learning to walk side by side, each within our own boundaries. I could feel the change within myself too. When I looked in the mirror now, I didn't see a tired, dimmed girl anymore. I saw a woman, one who had walked through misunderstanding, who had found her own voice, who knew now that love is only real when it comes with respect. Healing relationships doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, painful journey where every step forward makes old wounds ache, where every smile sometimes hides 1,000 unshed tears. But when apologies come from a real place, when understanding is honest, a new beginning can grow from there. My family wasn't perfect now, and maybe it never would be. But there was space for me, finally, not as a servant, not as a punching bag, but as a person, someone who belonged there with dignity and her own voice. I had learned that real love doesn't demand you to shrink. Real love accepts you, even with your boundaries. And to learn that, I had to walk through every kind of hurt that once felt like it would break me. But it didn't. It made me. As time passed, things found a new rhythm. Family gatherings still happened, but now the invitations came with choice, not expectation. Sometimes I would go, sometimes I wouldn't. And when I said no, I didn't drown in guilt anymore. I had built a new space in my life, a space that was mine alone, a small world where I could breathe freely, without fear. It was during this time that my friendship with Emily blossomed. Emily was an artist, open hearted, unconditional. Being with her taught me something I had never known before, that friendships could exist where you didn't have to make yourself smaller to be loved. We spent evenings in the park, sipping coffee, talking about anything or nothing. No roles to play, no masks to wear, just two people, accepting each other exactly as they were. One evening, Emily said to me, "You weren't made to live in someone else's shadow, Julia. You are your own light." Her words brought tears to my eyes, not from sadness, but from a kind of gratitude, a kind of healing that filled the empty spaces inside me. I started dreaming small dreams again. Saturday mornings were spent reading books at my favorite cafe. Sundays meant visiting museums without worrying about anyone else's needs. After work, I sketched quietly at home, each new line rewriting my own story, piece by piece. And the biggest change? Whenever someone tried to bury me under the weight of their plans in the name of duty, I no longer hesitated. I would say it clearly, calmly. No, this is my time. I learned that protecting your boundaries is the first step to loving yourself. I learned that relationships, whether by blood or by choice, only survive when there's equality and respect. One day, Mom said over the phone, "Julia, your voice sounds different now. Stronger, clearer." I laughed softly and replied, "Maybe it's because I'm not afraid of losing myself anymore, Mom. I know now. The people who truly love me will love me with my voice, not with my silence." She stayed quiet for a moment, and then she whispered, "I'm proud of you." Those were the words I had spent years silently aching to hear, selling my own silence just to earn them. But the funny thing was, now they were just a bonus, not a need. I was no longer a supporting character in my own life. No one else, not Mom, not Melissa, not anyone, got to write my story anymore. Yeah, I was the main character, with my choices, my mistakes, my victories, my failures. I knew now, love should never come at the cost of your voice. Saying yes only matters when you're free to say no. And most importantly, I knew